Thank you for that introduction and for having me on Evolve Beyond Borders today. My name is Tracee. I have 20 years experience in payroll and HR, both in-house and outsourcing. I started in PEO and then grew up through the outsourcing business and spent the last 6 years doing in-house global payroll and compensation. Joining me today is Kira. Kira, do you want to say a few words as well?
Yeah, thank you so much, Tracee, and thank you, Evolve, for having me on this wonderful chat, and to help spread our passion when it comes to global payroll. So my name is Kira Rubiano. I'm the Vice President of Global Payroll Operations for Atlas. I have over 15 years experience in global payroll outsourcing. So I've worked for multiple global payroll providers supporting companies all over the world. I like to say I have passion for payroll, but like most payroll practitioners and professionals, never thought I would end up in payroll. So my background's in international relations and law, but working in this space helps and satiates my desire to work cross-culturally and build connections and learn about the world. And I'm very, very excited to be here to share my passion and share, the knowledge and wisdom I've gained over the years in supporting companies all over the world. So thank you so much, Tracee, and looking forward to speaking with you today.
Great, thank you. And thank you to all of the attendees for joining us today. There is a lot of publicity around the demand for virtual work after the pandemic, and employees are getting creative with where they would like to do that virtual work, whether it be temporarily or permanently. So our objective with our time today is to share some of our thinking around the complexity of global payroll and the risks involved when employees want to cross borders to do that work. And what are some of the creative ways that employers can use to address that expectation of working from anywhere? We know that global payroll is incredibly complex and full of compliance risks. Payroll teams have been tackling those risks and complexities with their companies when they want to expand into new states or countries. So, Kara, what are some of the complex challenges you've faced in your background with global payroll?
Mhm. Thank you. And I wish we had hours and hours to talk about this, but I'm going to try my best to take, over 15 years of challenges and experiences and really hone in on it to get the best value for today's time. So throughout my career, I've supported companies in every single continent with the exception of Antarctica, but I don't doubt there will be global payroll in Antarctica very, very soon.
One day.
And one day for sure, in over 160 countries. And there has always and continues to be four key pillars of compliance. The first pillar, which is proper and compliant entity and employee registration. Two is accurate processing when it comes to pay slips, right, and calculations. Three, timely payment of employee salaries as per local law. And four, timely and accurate payroll filing, submission, and payment. Those are the four key pillars when it comes to, payroll compliance. And the largest challenge I have seen companies face is underestimating the time to ramp up in a new jurisdiction and not fully understanding the requirements for operating in that jurisdiction so that they can ensure compliance of those four key pillars. Now, oftentimes companies may not be fully aware of all the locally required registrations, for example, for tax authority, Social Security, pension, health, and what needs to be in place in order to really start hiring and payrolling individuals. And therefore, when they don't understand those risks and what's required, they're putting the entity at risk and they're putting the employees at risk. So, for example, and I'm going to give a couple examples here. You can incorporate an entity in Spain, but you must appoint a local tax representative. And if you haven't done that, right, and you just start hiring somebody, you will not be in compliance with the Spanish local tax regulators. And, for example, there are jurisdictions that require you to have Social Security registrations in place before you start hiring. And in some jurisdictions, you can only do that registration when you've hired your first individual. So understanding the mechanisms and requirements to operate in that country are absolutely critical. And a lot of companies don't truly take the time to understand what that entails and what they have to have in place. Another challenge that I've seen companies face is not understanding the local money movement requirements for paying salaries and taxes, for example. So in Colombia and Argentina, you must have salaries and taxes originate from a local bank account in local currency that's operated by the employer. So if a company doesn't have the mechanisms to be able to facilitate money movement, right, from, let's say, Colombia or Argentina, they won't have the ability to pay their employees or to pay the taxes as required per local law in the local currency. And for example, in many jurisdictions in Africa, you can pay people from abroad. Let's say you facilitate payment from your US or UK account for their salaries, but you can't pay taxes from abroad. So you have to have mechanisms in place and understand the requirements, for example, for moving money in that jurisdiction. And lastly, and this is where a lot of challenges you see for companies looking to implement work from anywhere, is how do you manage the employment of non-locals, right? So before sending an employee to a host location, whether on assignment or to accommodate a request for work from anywhere, it's critical for a company to understand the tax and compliance requirements of sending someone to work in a location other than the location they were hired to perform their work from. And that is, do you need to have other registrations in place? Do you have facilities to payroll that individual? What are the money movement requirements for getting that employee paid and any taxes paid? So at the end of the day, there is a plethora of different challenges that a company could face, but they have to ensure that whatever decisions they make along the way, that they're always keeping those four pillars of compliance at the top of their priority, because they have to be able to ensure the compliance of their entity and the employees, make sure that they're accurately processing the payroll, make sure that they're being timely with payment and are able to move money, and that they're also, fulfilling their obligations from a filing and submission and tax perspective. So it's, I don't mean to scare anybody by any means ever, but operating in a global environment is definitely something that can be challenging, but you have trusted people all over the world who are willing to help you and give you as much insight as possible so that you do it compliantly and accurately and hopefully with ease.
And that's a lot of complexity, right? So payroll teams can't just tackle this on their own. They need to work interdepartmentally within their company to make sure that they do circumvent a lot of that risk and challenge that comes along with global expansion. So what are some of the risks that a company might face if they are not prepared for those challenge complexity?
Thank you, Tracee. So to me, the risks are the challenges, basically. Underestimating the requirements and the time needed to be ready to hire. Okay. Depending on a company's overall strategic plans, a company may decide to incorporate an entity in a country, whether they're looking to expand into. That alone can take months, and even I've seen it take as much as up to a year to be able to, one, incorporate that entity, two, to get all the local registrations in place, three, to procure vendors, right? Because you need support with accounting, payroll, maybe it's legal labor law compliance. And oftentimes companies don't realize that you need to get all of those pieces in place. Just because you've incorporated doesn't mean you could start going out into the talent pool and hiring people. So depending on the nature and the business activities of the business, incorporation may be the appropriate route, okay? However, there are faster solutions to explore, such as employer of record options worldwide, which would allow a company to compliantly and quickly onboard and pay employees all over the world, mitigating compliance risk and increasing opportunity to attract top talent. Now, the direction a company takes as part of their expansion strategy is key. And that will heavily dictate their ability to, in essence, hit the ground running. If a company proceeds to hire individuals without a plan and without fully understanding the local requirements, both the company and the employee face multiple risks. One is it relates to labor law disputes. Two, tax authority scrutiny and penalties. Three, lack of protection for both the employee and the employer. And four, overall loss to the business in terms of productivity. So once a company understands what is the strategic approach that the business needs to take, whether it's incorporation, whether it's going with a employer of record option, they need to understand that either option requires some time, and it requires them to do research and understand what's required of them to be able to move forward so that they mitigate risks of labor law disputes, tax authority scrutiny, as mentioned, lack of protection for both them, the employees, and making sure that, they secure whatever business that they're looking to grow in that jurisdiction.
Yeah, plan is crucial. I've seen it trigger corporate tax nexus inadvertently, and they weren't aware. It is very important to plan it out. So, Kira, in your experience, what are some of tools or resources that you've used to tackle global expansion that you might use again and share with those that are watching today?
Yeah. So trusted advisors. Now, I know that word is often used in different forms, but when I mean by trusted advisors, it could mean working with global expansion consultants, okay, who have consulted companies on the markets, where it might be easier to ramp up and get, your business incorporated, where there's, top talent and what's the ease of doing business in that country. It could be accounting firms. So either Big Four, Big 10, or even local accounting firms. It could be an employer of record company, such as Atlas, but having a trusted partner who can guide you through complexities of operating across the globe or in that particular jurisdiction is absolutely key. The other thing is do your research. There are so many trusted online resources available out there. One of the first things that I do even today is I go to a government website. Every government out there basically has a website. Most of the time it's in English, but if not, you can hit that little translate button and it'll translate it for you. But even going to those government websites to understand, okay, oftentimes they'll say, what do you need to do to be registered as an employer? What sort of tax IDs do you need to have in place? What are tools available to you to be able to start operating in that country? But even just going to those websites, or let's say a Big Four oftentimes releases manuals on operating in certain countries, will allow you to have, great resources available at your fingertips to do some research. And the other aspect is follow a network. So there are so many professionals out there on LinkedIn, on other spaces such as on GPA, Global Payroll Association, or GPMI, Global Payroll Management Institute, that have gone through these same challenges or might be experiencing what you're experiencing right now and can give you great insight, or can introduce you to people who might be able to give you support and insight as you're looking to expand, or as you're looking to have talent work in other locations. So the key is don't go into a situation ill-informed. You have options available to you, whether it's a network, whether it's connecting on LinkedIn, whether it's doing your research online, or reaching out to companies that are well-versed in this space and can give you guidance. But just don't go into it blindly and naively. I think in my experience, I have definitely seen so many companies take the approach of, oh, we just sent somebody there. or, oh, I found, John Smith in London and I really like him, so I'm just going to have him start working for me. And so that's a very naive approach to take, and you don't want to put yourself and your company and the employee at risk, right? Because ultimately, an employee wants to ensure that not only are they compensated for their work, but they are protected as an employee of that company as well.
That's a really good point. I've actually had that happen in my past. And hiring managers, they want to go out and get that business. So whatever we can do to help facilitate that and speed that up is always a win-win for the company. In my role, with payroll advisory, we talk to a lot of clients who have either set up work from anywhere programs or are looking to structure them, because not only associates, but also leaders are asking for that. So how do you at Atlas address work from anywhere as a company?
So Atlas operates in 160 jurisdictions via a direct EOR, which is employer of record model, which means that we operate our own entities in every location, managing all components related to the local compliance, employment, benefits, and payroll. So we oversee all those 4 pillars that I mentioned earlier, plus on top of it, managing our own entities, which requires accounting, corporate tax compliance, labor law compliance, all aspects of it. So not only do we support our own internal employees throughout the world, we have over 90 languages on staff, just to give you as an example, but our customers come to support us for their hiring and talent needs globally as an employer of record. And much of their talent is looking to work in a host location, which is a location other than the one they were employed to perform their original duties. So we're able to do this because not only do we have our own entities and we can make sure that we run the payroll compliantly, but we also have an in-house visa and global mobility service and team, which allows us to understand how, the local compliance requirements for relocating individuals, whether it's, work permits, work authorization, work visas, and we're able to then manage the movement of those individuals by facilitating those work permits, visas, and authorizations, and then compliantly onboard and payroll them in our own local entities in that host location. I think oftentimes when a company gets a request to relocate somebody, right, they don't often realize that it's not just, buy them a plane ticket so that they can just, go to Tahiti and sit on the beach for, 6 months. But there's actually one work authorization, work permit requirements, right? Because they might be generating maybe even revenue for you in that location that you didn't know about. They have to have permissions to be able to work from that country. And depending on how long they are in and out of the country, they might have tax requirements in the host location. And they may still have home tax requirements in their home location, right? So, as a U.S. citizen, for example, you could be paying FICA, Social Security, Medicare for 10 years, right? If you ever want to come back to the United States, or you might have a house that you still have to pay, state taxes for and so forth. So it's just really, really important that companies take the time to understand what are, our requirements, right? And what protections do we need to ensure for not only our employees when they go into a host location or home location or leave their home location, but what do we as an employer also have an obligation to fulfill? And so it's important to get perspective from, global mobility providers or those that have that service available, and make sure that you can actually payroll them wherever they end up going, because there might be local currency controls that need to be met. There might be tax compliance concerns that need to be met. And they might also have home tax obligations that need to be considered before they leave the country. So definitely, once again, being informed, seeking guidance, looking at, what other companies are doing also is really key.
Agree. Yeah, you just can't escape taxes regardless of where you go.
Even if you want to.
True.
Sometimes, and I think it's interesting because what I'm seeing with the younger generation is, everyone's kind of like, I can work from anywhere because I'm a nomad and, I'll just like move around the world. But I think it's important to have a level of sophistication and understanding to say, well, what does that mean? Like, it can't be that easy, but it also isn't that hard anymore either, right? As long as you're working with the right solutions, the right provider to help support you in that need, and you're doing your research before you just ship yourself off or your employee off to another part of the world.
Mhm. Given all the landmines with global payroll expansion, allowing employees to choose where they work with no restrictions really isn't an option. But there are some creative ways to offer work from any of these types of locations. So we've seen clients that will allow their employees to select from where they currently have a footprint today. Maybe they are currently live in 10 countries, and they'll tell their associates, if you want to move to any of these locations, you can. Sometimes they have to segment that maybe by region, or maybe by the area of the company that they work in, or by language. Language is a big barrier to some of the global payroll situations in different countries. We've also seen a big adoption of the digital nomad visa. So this takes it off of the employer and puts it onto the employee. It is temporary, but it gives them an option of different locations to work from, visit, live for a period of time, anywhere from 4 months to 2 years. Some of them can even be renewed. And that's a good way for employers to not have to take on the burden of expansion, although it doesn't allow for a permanent fit. So those creative options work for existing employees, right? But some leaders and hiring managers want to hire the best talent, regardless of geographic location. So how are you guys tackling that as well?
Yeah. And thank you for that, Tracee. You're absolutely right. Oftentimes what I've seen is that employees are sometimes scared to take on that burden, to be honest with you. So if somebody told me, hey, you can do this, but you have to make sure you do all your taxes and manage all those components yourself, I'd be like, ooh, I don't, I'd have to think about it, twice. Do I want kind of that liability and ownership? Honestly, the key to supporting companies, their leadership and talent is to ensure that the solution you put forward is ultimately compliant, right? You want to make sure there's protections for the employee and the employer. And an option that allows all parties to increase speed to hire is going with an EOR model that operates in the locations that you're looking to support your talent and can facilitate the management of employees in that location. So in that sense, you have a peace of mind that everything is being handled for that employee in terms of taxes, compliance, protections. And then you also have a level of protection as an employer managing the employment of that employee, because the liability ultimately falls on the EOR from a tax and employment perspective. And the other thing is you want to make sure you have global visibility, right? So if you have an employee, that's hopping around as a digital nomad, maybe that's great for the employee, but do you truly know, where they are? If they're managing all those, tax compliance components, is there any risk for you having that employment relationship with them, depending on the jurisdiction they're in? So it's really important to have that visibility and transparency and accountability when it comes to your talent or hiring talent all over the world. And, a lot of the solutions out there today even have technologies that allow you to basically know exactly what's happening on the payroll, what's happening on the employment benefit side, where are they at that moment, where are they located? So having the compliance solution and the technology solution is just really, really key. And obviously, as I've mentioned before, and as we've talked about throughout this session, is do your research and work with a trusted partner and solution so that you manage the business expectations, and ultimately then you'll be successful in either hiring or retaining the talent globally that you're looking to secure. So you want to be creative, but you also want to be smart. And ultimately, whatever you do, you want to be compliant, right? Because at the end of the day, as payroll practitioners, whilst we are a critical component of the business, we're also a key component of the business that helps ensure that our talent is safe, right? That we as a business are compliant, and that we are putting forward the right solutions to be able to manage business expectations and the needs of the business.
Absolutely. So it's possible, right, to accommodate the work from anywhere expectations of the working staff these days. But it's important to, number one, have a trusted advisor, do your research, and make sure that you have a plan. So, Kira, I really appreciated having this conversation with you. Hopefully, those of you watching feel a little more energized about global payroll and how you can accommodate these requests that you're getting. Love to hear from you. The chat will remain open if you have any questions for us.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Tracee, and thank you, everyone. And thank you for Evolve, for your support in helping educate the global community, and happy to answer any questions.